Hey, good morning, Tom and Sean. Yeah, it's been interesting the last year to hear folks who were not here on January 6th talk about January 6th over the last year. I was here in Washington, D.C., all over town on January 6th. We started in the early morning hours on the south lawn of the White House near the Eclipse, where staging was set up for President Trump to be giving a speech. It was almost a celebratory speech of his presidency. You had a number of persons speaking to the accomplishments of the Donald Trump presidency in the early morning. And then, of course, President Trump's speech later on in the day. But you had upwards of 1 million people coming to Washington from all over America. And these were not, folks looking to cause trouble. These were families. You had grandmothers in the crowd. You had children in the crowd, quite frankly. And I would almost equate it to what you'd imagine a Super Bowl rally for a team coming home, a welcome home rally. There were, of course, folks upset about the election results, some not believing those election results, others hoping for an 11th hour overturn of those results. But I think by and large, the mood that day from the folks that I spoke to, and again, we were at the White House amongst the hundreds of thousands of people along the National Mall right outside of the Washington Monument, there was a sense of finality almost, that there was a recognition that this is very likely the last time they were going to see President Trump speak as the sitting president. So there was a sense of reverence in the day, folks excited to see the president speak. And keep in mind, this was coined as the Save America March. There was always supposed to be a march to the Capitol that day. I think a lot of folks forget that. They see the riots, they see some of the footage from that day, and they see kind of the worst aspects of that day, but those worst aspects only took place over a few hours later on in the day. For the most of that day, it was a family celebration, folks who were in support of Donald Trump, the things that he represented, and as his speech came to a close early in the afternoon, what you had was waves of people, and keep in mind, about 1 million people coming to see the president speak, waves of those folks, tens of thousands of them, starting marching towards the Capitol, and we made it, I want to say, in one of those initial waves, but we didn't see much happening on the western side of the Capitol. We're on the eastern side right now, right in front of the Supreme Court. We ended up on this side, and then we started hearing word that there were some bad actors breaking into the Capitol. We walked around to the front, and then what you had was kind of the fog of war. As the hundreds of thousands of folks gathered on the western side of the Capitol, tear gas starting to being launched by Capitol Hill police, and a lot of folks wondering, which direction do I go? Seeing people move up the scaffolding to the Capitol steps. But for the most part, as we've seen in pictures and as has been delineated on this network, these people were here in support of President Trump, and by and large, that's what you saw that day, Tom.
Mike, I want to point out that you were there as a journalist. You were covering this event, and I remember being concerned for you. You and I spoke in the middle of all of this, and as you were moving up the west front of the Capitol, I remember asking myself, how is it that all of these people are being allowed onto the inaugural platform, places that, having worked there, I know people are not supposed to be? Did it surprise you at just how people were able to sort of overrun these areas that ordinarily would be off limits to the public?
Yeah, Tom, I think the most surprising aspect of that day was just the general lack of authority in and around Washington, but particularly around the Capitol. You just didn't see, from my vantage point, a lot of police presence. There were not a lot of Capitol police on the front lawn of the Capitol. And of course, the police that you did start seeing as the throngs of folks started gathering and trying to move up the stairs, they started launching tear gas, and that kind of caused everyone to get up in a stir and incited the crowd. And of course, you had the bad actors who wanted to go into the Capitol. But a lot of folks were just concerned. They weren't sure which direction to go. Obviously, they were excited to be out protesting, using their First Amendment rights that day, but we kind of got swept up in the crowd, and we really didn't have any choice but to go with the crowd up underneath that scaffolding where they were going to have the inauguration. And we did kind of at one point looked to each other. I was looking to my cameraman and said, I just hope that, those grandmothers and those children that were there that day, we were just concerned that, folks were going to get crushed, people were going to fall down, maybe get trampled.
Yeah,
but there was a sense that,
there was a sense it could get
we
out of hand.
weren't in charge anymore.
There was a sense it could get out of hand. I have really quickly for you. You talked to a lot of people that day. Did the folks who were part of the march really believe that they were going to prevent the certification of the election, or were they going up there just to make their voices heard, by and large, the folks that you spoke with?
Sure. It was by and large to have their voices heard, Tom. Again, folks were in town in D.C. that day, almost, I would say, as a send-off to President Trump. Of course, to fight for President Trump in regards to letting their voices being heard, shout at the Capitol, wave their flags, show the presence. But by and large, the folks that I dealt with, a lot of families, a lot of small business owners from across America coming to town just to say, look, we don't agree with this election results, but we are here in support of our president, and what unfolded later on in that day was not representative of the large, vast amount of folks that I came in contact that day.
All right, I want to thank you, Mike Carter. Appreciate those reflections today.